always knew I wanted to be a mom.
I think I always knew.
I never thought of becoming a mom.
That I wanted to do.
You know, I did always see myself as a mom.
I really was sort of ambivalent about having children. It wasn't something I was driven to do.
And known I wanted to be a mom. You know, I think our mothers' stories influence us in so many ways that we don't really realize until we really sort of analyze them.
I think my own childhood was challenging enough that I had mixed feelings about whether that was something I would want to pass along to a future generation.
I have a huge extended family, and in my extended family, it's kind of the norm to have 3, 4, 5, 6 kids.
For me, motherhood was kind of like a natural progression of just like stages of development. I felt like there was this clock, and I mean, I've already been here 2 years, and I really need to stick it out if I want to be a mom.
I got married in March, and by August I was pregnant.
Everyone was getting pregnant right away. Like you were married young and you got pregnant right away. And so it was at times a hard go through for those 2 years when everyone was calling and saying they were pregnant and I couldn't get pregnant.
Doctors are telling me there is a chance that you will never have a child.
It was not actually very difficult for me to get pregnant.
We didn't have really any problems.
I think once I found out about it, I was very nervous because, you know, I was pregnant at 20 years old.
I mean, there was like the initial shock, and then it took a really long time to sink in.
I wasn't in a good relationship, and so I knew from the beginning that this was something I was going to have to do on my own.
There's times during my pregnancy where I didn't feel like I liked the way that I looked.
I actually had more issues with my body before I had like a real bump.
I got wide.
Fear of gaining weight and fear of my body changing. You know, I had been an athlete for so long. It was like fitness and being in shape was really important to me.
I think because I am somebody who has worked so hard to have control over my physical condition, that having to surrender some of that is definitely terrifying.
My physical outside self to me didn't matter. What really mattered to me was what was going on inside.
It was like the first time in my life that I felt fat and beautiful.
I did have to really listen to my body when it was tired or when it was, you know, when I was hungry.
I came away with a more integrated, nuanced perspective on my body and my relationship to it.
I decided, look, you know what? I'm almost 40 years old and I just had 2 kids, and give yourself a break.
It's so amazing what our bodies can do.
You know, for my body to be able to experience all of that and, you know, still be where I am.
I dealt with really serious depression that first trimester. I remember there was like a full day where I didn't get out of bed. I was just like laying in bed watching the sun come up, and I watched it go back down. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing to this baby? And I remember crying and saying, like, I'm so sorry, baby, I'm so sorry.
I'm a graduate student, so I had a huge amount of responsibilities on me while pregnant. The racial trauma is a very, very big deal because it directly impacts my health and wellness.
So much of my energy is going towards the pregnancy and supporting my body and the baby that there just doesn't feel like there's much left over. And I don't like that.
All the way to the end, I didn't know what was going to happen because I always had this fear of losing her.
When you see all the things that go wrong and you know all the things that can go wrong, it's harder to just kind of relax and enjoy.
Am I doing it right? Could I have eaten
What if
better?
my baby
Should I
gets
have
here and I
slept
don't
better?
have
Did I,
connection to
did
her?
I
I am
hurt
so
him by
What if she
running?
doesn't
into
like
the world, like
Am I
knowing
gonna
that
be
it's
a good
gonna
mom?
How
be
I know I'm
just
gonna
a
be a
horrible
parent?
blow,
Am I
and
going
I
to
just
be a
don't
parent?
understand.
Can I do this? All of a sudden it cleared, like that heavy fog in my second trimester, like lifted.
I loved being pregnant.
I really love being pregnant.
I loved being pregnant. I loved the feeling, the kicking, the moving. I just found it so astounding and fascinating that inside me there was a life growing.
The first movement felt a little bit like muscle twitches.
Her movements are definitely more like somersaults, where like it's just this sweeping like push.
She hiccuped a lot. I remember that, you know, feeling her hiccups.
I'd had to have a late term abortion. It was honestly the hardest decision of my life.
In August, we found out I was pregnant. And in September, I had a miscarriage at 10 and a half weeks, which was so much harder and sadder than I could have imagined.
I went to the bathroom and I saw blood, and I tried to wipe it away and it just kept coming and coming and coming. And so my husband and I drove to our nearest hospital here in town.
2.5 weeks of heavier and heavier bleeding before passing the pregnancy. And I really got into a bad mental space where I felt like I had something dead inside of me that I couldn't shed.
She said, I'll see what I can do, and just left me in the exam room in the ER alone. I mean, it seemed like for forever. She eventually found a Doppler that she could use, and she was able to find a heartbeat. But I remember that we were all terrified.
Ultimately, we had sort of a service in the front yard. We said some words.
there is this Western medicine routine, which is you come in and at a certain amount of time, if you haven't progressed, you get the Pitocin, and then the Pitocin jacks everything up, and then you're in an excruciating amount of pain. And then you ask for the epidural, and then you slow everything down, and then you've been laboring too long and you get a C-section.
My intention had been to have a natural delivery without medication, and that was not meant to be.
I don't know. I feel like my plan is just to get her here safely. And if I can do it without an epidural, great. If I end up needing the epidural, fine.
I would be working really hard at meditation and hypnobirth techniques to work through the pain, to distract myself, to release it.
I placed the yoga ball in the shower and I placed the water on hot, and I was just kind of sitting on the ball, just kind of going back and forth.
I was just waiting and waiting and waiting, which is so much of birth.
At a certain point, I think I was about 4 centimeters dilated. The pain was just unbearable. And I started to beg for an epidural. And I mean beg.
You have to give your trust to somebody that you just met, you know, and you're in this really vulnerable state. I mean, I've never been more vulnerable. You're naked, you're bleeding, you know, you're hazy because you're on pain medication.
Here I'm surrounded by 10 interns watching this. And I was like, and I just wanted him out. And I was going back and forth between the pain and why are all these people staring at me?
I didn't have an epidural, and I remember thinking, like, if someone could just tell me how many contractions I have to do, I will be way better. Like, if you could just like put it on like a blackboard, we could just like cross them off as they go, like, so I know there's like an end.
I think everything happened so fast. It was hard for me to even wrap my mind around like, oh, I'm having a C-section.
We had a complicated delivery with her.
She got
it was a baby with the umbilical cord,
and they finally on the third
from
try,
her neck, and then it was the forceps delivery, and the baby was in
scheduled
distress,
it.
the whole
They were
thing.
saying, oh, she's
They
out.
gave
My
me
husband was like,
Pitocin to start the
And
labor, and sure,
it
it
was
came
like
out,
silent.
1, 2, 3.
And I said,
Yeah,
why don't
my
I
eyes
hear
were
her?
like
Why don't I
swollen
hear
in the
her? She's out.
But then
You know, what's
basically
Especially
within
when it
15
came
minutes,
time to
I was
push.
back
And then
in
it
the
just got
operating room.
really
My
loud.
doctor was there, and I was pushing, and I was pushing.
If there's something you really want, I find you endure.
I felt very disappointed in myself afterwards for, you know, all of these reasons, that I couldn't tolerate the pain and needed the epidural, that I didn't have the physical capacity to push out my own baby. So I felt disconnected from the part of my body that needed me.
I can remember them handing him to me right after he was born, and I can hear my voice saying, my baby, but not feeling the words I was saying. Having a baby was like just really I was naive. Like, it was just earth-shatteringly hard.
I fell into a pretty severe depression.
I had really bad postpartum depression.
I had really bad postpartum.
You know, and all of a sudden you're just like alone with this baby.
Empty. And it was very self-isolating.
I do remember standing at the doorstep, holding this bundle of joy, screaming, by the way, and shoving it to my mom's hand and saying, listen, just take her away. I don't want to stay with that. Like, I don't know what to do with her. I don't want her.
You know, I was so excited during the pregnancy, and yet at that time, this newborn that just screamed, I was depressed.
Women mourn a death, which is the life they had before.
There's a lot of, mom guilt constantly. I do still actively have my own life that I try to upkeep, because if I don't have that, my mental health will suffer.
Looking back, I think that was part of taking care of myself. I needed that space to be a better mom.
Mom works, mom contributes, and mom has other responsibilities outside of the house.
It's not motherhood versus career. It's all together.
As scary as it is, it's a beautiful thing.
At the end of the day, seriously, it's all about how you perceive yourself.
There's nothing you can really do other than grow with your child?
I have often thought about it in pretty binary, extreme ways, like getting pregnant felt like an ending, and it's not an ending. It's a transition. It's not a complete loss and a complete gain. It's just fitting in different puzzle pieces.